What's up, guys? Welcome to another episode of The Impact. It's me, Dia, joined by RMC. RMC, you are in this direction. Hello, hello. We are here to cover the Proving Grounds. We get to set up for all things Proving Grounds. This is going to be the final tournament of this split, really, RMC, and this is where we get to find out if, between last split and this split, the pipeline has started working. The academy teams have started leveling up, and it's just that we need to talk about right here, because something that we have thought about going into today is, what do these teams stand to gain? A lot of people have said, and you, actually, before the show, were talking about how academy teams, it's more just about not losing than anything, but for amateur teams, it's so much more.
I know it's kind of shocking to think that the better teams are the ones with the higher stakes, but the only prize at the end of this is actually just prize money. There's $100,000 in prize pool split up among the top four teams.
I'd be pretty hyped to compete for that amount of money.
Well, then you don't get 100,000. Okay, 30,000 for the first team, 20,000 for second, 15 for third, and 10,000 for fourth place. But for the amateur and academy teams, you're also playing for pride. Like you said, is the talent pipeline working? And for the academy teams, they're the ones with the owners to prove that they are better, that the pipeline is working, that they deserve those spots. And while it might mean more to the amateur teams to win and prove that, hey, we're really good, pick us up, it's important for the players on the amateur teams, but it's important for the entire team, orgs, coaches included, for the academy teams.
So you touched on it a little bit right there, but the amateur teams, they got here by winning the qualifiers. All of the Tier 2 and Tier 1 tournaments that we've covered so far on the Impact, that's how these teams got here. But how did the academy teams end up here? Because not all of them are in attendance.
Yeah, I think the bigger question here, Tia, is how did teams from the academy not get here? Of course, there is CLG Academy. We have to pay our respects to them. Press F in the chat there to pay our respects to them. They didn't make it because they got knocked out in the Unified Grand Prix. So what happened was the bottom four academy teams had to go through the Tier 1 qualifiers, and that was Dignitas Academy, GG Academy, TSM Academy, and CLG Academy. The other six, though, auto-qualified.
Now, we don't have official confirmation on the bracket, but we've got pretty darn close to official confirmation on that bracket. Let's take a look and see just which teams are facing off against who for the first round. One of the things that really stood out to me, obviously, is that, well, the higher you placed, the easier your matchups are supposed to be. So TL Academy, the very best academy team, at least according to the results from the academy split, is going to be going up against Supernova. And, well, that RMC is a very, very difficult matchup.
A little bit here. I mean, Supernova's put all miracles before, but TL Academy is a whole different beast. And I'm glad you mentioned the seeding here, because the seeding is interesting. The Academy seeding, very straightforward, very easy to understand. The UGP seeding at the bottom of the bracket, a little bit easier to understand as well, because Supernova was the last place team who qualified out of UGP, followed by Resolve, followed by Zeus, followed by the three Academy teams that made it. But what is interesting is the middle of the pack there, because Wildcard Red, C9 Amateur, AOE Esports, and 100 Thieves Next. These four amateur teams qualified earlier, and so their latter results don't matter. They were seeded by when they qualified. So that is the 7th, 8th, 9th, and 10th place. And interestingly enough, if you look at the bracket here, they are in the middle, and they are facing off against each other. Cloud9 Amateur versus AOE, and then you get Wildcard facing off against 100 Thieves Next.
In a way, I kind of like that reward system, if we can call it that, because having the gift of not facing off against an academy team in the first round is already a blessing. But in this case, it won't entirely save you. There is a loser's bracket, so anybody who does get knocked out of that first round still has the chance to take you down a second time if you do end up getting bumped down later. It's a little bit iffy, but I like that at least they've got that saving grace for themselves, and I like that it rewards some teams that, shall we say, spiked a little bit earlier.
When you enter this, you're in here to win it. You're in here to win everything at the end of the day. Whether you're ranked 16 seed, ranked 15 seed, 14 seed, you want to get to the end. You want to be the winner at the end of it. And to do that, you've got to beat every team in the bracket anyway. So it actually might not be a terrible thing that Supernova, Zeus, Resolve, they're meeting the top of the academy teams early. Because as we've seen in UGP, sometimes these academy teams don't fully prepare for these amateur teams. and they're not ready for the cheese, the pocket picks, the unique strategies which Amateur has homebrewed.
We could get a really interesting round 2 even where AOE go up against or AOE or Cloud9 Amateur go up against Supernova. That would be so ridiculous.
Yes!
I don't think it'll go that way, but I didn't mention Zeus mostly because I feel like of all of the amateur teams, maybe them and Wildcard, who I know we talked a little bit about, I feel like they're the ones where the gap is the smallest. I think that facing off against an academy team so early for them is actually probably better because you're not going to be encountering a massive gap initially. You're going to be feeling out what level of competition we're at. Maybe you lose, maybe you win, but likely you lose. And then from there, you're able to adapt moving into week 2 and week 3 a lot better than the great distance that Resolve and Supernova are going to have to cover between the top of academy and amateur late seeding.
Yeah,
You know what I'm saying?
fair enough. Yeah, no, I
Yeah.
completely agree with you. Like I said, same point there.
Yeah.
But we mentioned the amateur teams. I want to touch a little bit on the academy teams that qualified out of UGP as well,
Please.
because they too drew the short end of the stick in a way. They're going to be facing other academy teams, pardon me, in round 1 here. Dignitas Academy, Golden Gardens Academy, and TSM Academy will be running up against Immortals Academy, 100 Thieves Academy, as well as EG Academy here, who have beat them before in the regular season. So a bit of a tough draw for them as well here. And I feel like there's an opportunity for them because as much as we talk about the teams maybe not preparing for their round 1 opponents quite as much for the amateur teams, I think the experience in UGP has given these academy teams perhaps a slightly different perspective, maybe help to open up their horizons, and maybe we start seeing some less meta things come through from them.
That would be fun. I do want to ask though, because we've touched on so many matchups at this point. There are 8 games that you could possibly watch, but if you had to pick one RMC, which one are you tuning into? Which one are you recommending?
My heart's still in the amateur scene here. And also we're sponsored by AOE.
Chill.
So my match for the week has to be AOE versus C9 Amateur here, but also because C9 Amateur versus AOE is looking to be the closest matchup we have here on paper. I mean, they are the 8th and 9th seeds coming into this, so their seeding is already the closest. Both of them didn't play in UGP, and they're both amateur teams, so I would love to get to see them go at it head-to-head in round 1 right away.
Okay, I actually really like that. I think that it's going to set the stage really well for where Amateur is going to be at, because I'm expecting to see them both play at much higher levels as well. Cloud9 Amateur and AOE are both a little bit swingy, but I want to see them have tightened up a lot of that play style as well, and I think it'll be a really good benchmark for what we're getting. Same thing, actually, for me, draws me to a different matchup, though, in terms of benchmarks. I'm looking at FlyQuest Academy versus Zeus Gaming, because I think we're going to get a really good idea of where Zeus are playing in the tournament, but at the same time, FlyQuest is actually the team that were I to make such a prediction, would think will take the tournament. I'm expecting them to go far, if not to win, and this is going to be a really good indicator to me of whether they came in prepared for all the amateur teams before having to face down each academy team that bested them in the regular season.
Considering that you're using this as a benchmark, am I to take this that you think Zeus is potentially one of the best benchmarks to measure FlyQuest by? Or are you saying that you're just going to constantly vote FlyQuest Academy as the game to watch every week?
Undetermined. Maybe not in week 2, but like in week 3, almost definitely. Because if they make it, they're going to be going either against TL Academy or an amateur team. I would say that is probably the biggest limb that I'll go out on for this season. I know that you and I were talking a little bit before as well about other crazy things that might happen in RMC. Could you share with the class, what do you think might go down here that will surprise the average viewer?
Ooh, okay. The average viewer here. I'm going to assume that maybe they're not too hot on the amateur scene. I mean, like
Sure.
we said, if Talent Pipeline is working, academy teams should be heads and shoulders above the amateurs for the most part. That's it. My hot take is that Wildcard Gaming Red will make top 4 here. I don't think they'll win it, but I think they'll be top 4.
Interesting. You brought up something that I think bears mentioning or diving a little bit more in depth into. You said if the pipeline is working, that an academy team should win. But
Mhm.
last split, an academy team didn't win. Why is it that we're predicting that Wildcard Red will only make top 4 and not that they will win?
Last split, when I looked at Noorg here, Noorg did win it. But when I was looking at the bracket initially, I actually didn't necessarily think they were going to win. I mean, you're looking at teams which are stacked with players like Darshan or, Fire, Hanser was playing with TSM Academy already at that point here. There's a lot of known proven talent. So it was a little bit of a surprise when Noorg won it, but they had the potential. Their roster was incredibly stacked. You had Fire, the amateur champion who, won everything in amateur already, should frankly be in an academy team. It's a crime that he hasn't been picked up. Viper and a big 3 out of 5 day players, LCS experience coming through already for Noorg. So there's a lot of strong talent there. Value had proven himself throughout the Proving Grounds as a very strong player. No LCS experience, but with all this experience around to coach him, I mean, he looked really good by the end of it. And Wildcard, to me, very similar story here. You've got Arrow, who feels almost like the Fire of yesteryear. Frankly, I don't know what Arrow's doing down here in amateur. He deserves better, and he's been dominating. You've got Dabshin, you've got Bradley, who are learning under the tutelage, and they're such strong mechanical players as well.
I like it. You're hedging your bets, and I can only respect it based on exactly what you talked about with the experience gap. There are very clear differences between Noorg and Wildcard that I'm betting Wildcard can overcome some of. We'll see if it's enough. My question now is going to be a little bit more difficult, and that is that with Noorg having won last split, what is the difference between them and, say, an academy team that wins this split? Do you think that this split, things are more or less even, and that most of the academy teams are playing at the level of Noorg, or that Noorg were last split?
Oh, yeah, you weren't kidding when you said it was a tough one, Tia. I mean, I do think the academy teams have definitely leveled up a bit. I mean, the fact that they have more games to play in the first place, I think has helped a lot with that here. And unfortunately, we didn't get to see Noorg back in because their top laner and their jungler, Viper and Anda, got picked up by Immortals Academy. So right off the bat there, that's a level up to the academy scene right away.
That's the pipeline working.
Exactly. That is the pipeline in process. I mean, Value Big and Fire not being academy though, that hurts a little bit there. But I do think that if Noorg were to be playing this split, they would have a harder time. Would they be able to win it? I think they still can. I don't know if Academy's leveled up quite enough yet to match Noorg at its peak, but I would not be as confident in saying that. Even if I saw them here, I'd say, top 4 finish with a good chance of the crown. But I think C9 Academy, FlyQuest, TL Academy, these 3 teams have looked really, really strong. TL Academy actually surprised me a little bit in the playoff run. They looked better than I expected. And yeah, I'm just not sure how Noorg would stack up to them this split.
There's a lot of expectations set up, and while the first round should be relatively self-explanatory, we got a heck of a lot of great League of Legends to watch in this tournament, and I can't wait to see what upsets there are. If an amateur team can take it away, or if Academy has leveled up just enough to take that top spot. We'll be back next week with yet another episode of The Impact as we adapt our recording schedule slightly to fit the challenges of scheduling around these tournaments. Remember, if you enjoyed this, to like, to comment, to subscribe, to share, to do all the things. RMC, am I missing anything that one should do when they enjoyed an episode?
Yeah, I mean, don't forget to keep watching, set it on loop, tell everybody, Twitter, Reddit, whatever it takes. Send it to your neighbors, just hop on over, tell them the URL, do whatever it takes. We need to make an impact with The Impact.
That's cool, boys. You know nothing about that.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, of course. I have been Dia. This has been...
I've been RNC.
Oh, I'm so glad to hear it. And we will be back next week with another episode of The Impact.